Monaco looked beautiful from a distance. That was the lie. Tourists saw glittering yachts, luxury hotels, and endless wealth reflecting across the Mediterranean Sea. But beneath the polished surface, power ruled everything. And power belonged to men like Luca De Santis. For nearly 15 years, Luca had built an empire that stretched across Europe. Politicians feared him. Businessmen respected him. Criminals avoided crossing him. At 38 years old, he controlled casinos, shipping routes, private security companies, and enough legitimate businesses to make prosecutors question where the law ended and influence began. People called him many things. The King of Monaco, the Ghost of the Riviera, the Mafia Boss. Luca didn't care what they called him. Fear was useful. Fear kept people predictable, and predictable people rarely caused problems. That was why nobody understood what happened the night Isabella Hart vanished. Not even Luca. 3 months earlier, the Aurelia Casino was preparing for its grand summer reopening. The casino was Luca's masterpiece. 6 floors of luxury overlooking the harbor. Crystal chandeliers imported from Venice. Private gaming rooms reserved for royalty and billionaires. Art galleries displaying collections worth millions. Every detail had been carefully designed, including the paintings. That was how Isabella Hart entered his world. She wasn't famous. Not yet. 28 years old. American. Quiet. Talented. A painter whose work carried a strange emotional depth that made people stop and stare. The casino's creative director had discovered her work at a gallery in Paris. 2 weeks later, she was standing inside Aurelia Casino, holding a contract worth more money than she had ever seen. She accepted immediately. Why wouldn't she? For Isabella, it was an opportunity that could change her life. For Luca, she was simply another artist hired to complete a project. At least, that was what he told himself. The first time he noticed her wasn't dramatic. There were no sparks, no instant attraction, no cinematic moment. He simply happened to walk through the gallery floor while construction crews were still working. Isabella stood alone on a ladder. Paint covered her hands. A streak of blue crossed her cheek. She was completely unaware that one of the most powerful men in Europe had entered the room. Most people became nervous around Luca. They watched every word, every movement, every expression. Not Isabella. She didn't even look at him. She was too focused on her work. Luca stopped walking. For reasons he couldn't explain, he found himself watching her. She was painting a storm over the sea. The image felt alive, wild, beautiful, dangerous. The kind of beauty that couldn't be controlled. Something about it held his attention longer than it should have. Finally, she noticed him. Their eyes met. Just for a moment. Most people looked away first. She didn't. Neither did he. Then she climbed down from the ladder and returned to work. As if he were nobody special, the encounter should have ended there. Instead, Luca found himself returning to the gallery again, and again, and again, always with another excuse. Checking progress, inspecting construction, reviewing security, anything except admitting the truth. He was curious. Weeks passed, then months. The paintings transformed the casino. Visitors couldn't stop talking about them. Neither could Luca, although he rarely admitted it aloud. He learned things about Isabella accidentally. She preferred working late at night. She listened to classical music while painting. She drank far too much coffee. She spent most of her earnings sending money back to family members who constantly seemed to need help. Most importantly, she never treated Luca differently from anyone else. She wasn't impressed by power. That fascinated him more than it should have. One evening, he found her standing alone on a balcony, overlooking the harbor. The city lights shimmered across the water. "You should be celebrating," Luca said. "The gallery opens tomorrow." She smiled slightly. "I don't like crowds. Most artists enjoy attention. Most artists lie." That answer surprised him. A small laugh escaped before he could stop it. Isabella looked genuinely shocked. Did I just make Luca De Santis laugh? His expression immediately hardened. You shouldn't believe every rumor you hear. Then tell me which ones are wrong. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Dangerous, comfortable, unexpected. Luca stepped closer. Not enough to touch, just enough to feel the tension. You ask questions most people are afraid to ask, and you avoid answering them. Their eyes locked. Neither moved. Neither looked away. For the first time in years, Luca felt something he couldn't easily control, and that frightened him more than he would ever admit. The reopening night was perfect, until it wasn't. Celebrities filled the casino. Champagne flowed endlessly. The paintings became the centerpiece of the evening. Reporters praised Isabella's work. Collectors wanted to buy everything. By midnight, she should have been celebrating. Instead, she disappeared. One moment, she was there. The next, she wasn't. No goodbye. No message. No warning. Her apartment was empty. Her phone was gone. Her bank account untouched. Security cameras showed nothing unusual. Police assumed she had left voluntarily. The casino staff moved on. The media forgot within days. Life continued. Except for Luca. Because something felt wrong. Very wrong. People leave clues. People make mistakes. People leave traces behind. Isabella had left nothing. And that was exactly what bothered him. 3 weeks later, Luca stood alone inside the gallery after closing. The room was silent, empty. Her paintings surrounded him on every wall, a reminder of someone who seemed to have vanished from existence. Then his head of security entered. Boss, Luca didn't turn around. What is it? We found something. For the first time in weeks, genuine emotion crossed Luca's face. What? The security chief swallowed. A camera from a service alley behind the casino. Luca slowly turned. And it was erased. His eyes narrowed. Completely? Almost. A long silence followed. Then the security chief handed him a photograph. A single frame, recovered from damaged footage. Luca stared at it. His heartbeat slowed, then accelerated. Because the image showed Isabella, surrounded by men, being forced into a black vehicle against her will. The room became very quiet, dangerously quiet, the kind of silence that made grown men nervous. Luca looked at the photograph for several seconds, then several more. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, too calm. Find them. The security chief hesitated. Boss, every country. Luca's gaze never left the image. Every city. His fingers tightened around the photograph. Every port. The paper nearly tore. Every border crossing. His voice dropped lower, colder, more dangerous. No one sleeps. The security chief nodded immediately. And if we find who took her, for the first time, genuine fury appeared in Luca's eyes. The fury of a man who had spent weeks trying to convince himself he didn't care. A man who suddenly realized he had been lying to himself. Because he cared far more than he should. Far more than was safe. Far more than anyone knew. Luca stared at Isabella's face in the photograph, then delivered the order that would shake criminal networks across Europe. Bring her home. And somewhere in the darkness beyond Monaco, a war quietly began. The search began before sunrise. By noon, half of Europe's criminal underworld had heard the same rumor. Luca De Santis was looking for someone. Not a rival. Not a politician. Not a traitor. A woman. And that frightened people far more than any declaration of war. Because everyone knew Luca De Santis. They knew how he reacted when business was threatened. They knew how he reacted when betrayed. But nobody had ever seen how he reacted when someone he cared about disappeared. Not even Luca understood it himself. For weeks, he convinced himself the search was practical, necessary. She had worked inside one of his properties. Her disappearance represented a security breach, a liability, a potential threat. The explanation sounded reasonable. Unfortunately, nobody believed it, especially not Marco Ricci, Luca's oldest friend and head of security. Marco had watched the empire grow from nothing. He had stood beside Luca during wars, betrayals, and assassinations, and now he watched his boss stare at Isabella's recovered photograph every single night. The evidence was impossible to ignore. Luca cared, far more than he wanted to admit. The first lead came from Marseille. A shipping container connected to a trafficking network had been intercepted. Inside, authorities discovered records linking several disappearances across Europe. One name appeared repeatedly: Victor Arment, a powerful figure with connections to multiple criminal organizations, including the Morelli family, Luca's oldest enemies. The discovery immediately changed everything. This was no random kidnapping. This was organized, planned, funded. Someone important wanted Isabella hidden. The question was, why? Meanwhile, Isabella woke up to darkness. The room smelled of salt water and damp concrete. Her wrists ached. Her head pounded. For several moments, she couldn't remember what had happened. Then fragments returned. The alley behind the casino. A hand covering her mouth. The black vehicle. The injection. Fear settled into her chest. Slow and cold. She forced herself to breathe. Panic wouldn't help. Panic never helped. The room was small. No windows. A metal door. One chair. One bed. Nothing else. Someone had prepared this place carefully. Someone expected her to stay. The realization was terrifying. But what frightened her most was one simple question. Why her? She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't famous. She wasn't connected to politics. She was just an artist. At least, that was what she believed. Back in Monaco, Luca refused to sleep. 3 weeks became 4. 4 became 5. The search consumed him. Business meetings were shortened. Social appearances disappeared. Even allies noticed the change. The man who once controlled every emotion now carried visible exhaustion beneath his eyes. One evening, Marco entered Luca's office carrying a file. The expression on his face immediately caught Luca's attention. What? Marco placed the file on the desk. We found her family. Luca froze. Slowly, he opened the folder. Inside were photographs, financial records, phone logs, debt reports. His expression darkened with every page. Because Isabella's family wasn't struggling, they were drowning. Millions of euros owed to dangerous people. Years of gambling losses. Illegal loans. Hidden transactions. And one payment stood out above all others. A massive transfer made 2 days before Isabella disappeared. The sender remained anonymous. The recipient was her older brother. The amount was enough to erase every debt. Silence filled the room. Luca understood immediately. Someone had paid them. Someone had bought something. Or someone. For the first time since the investigation began, genuine rage entered the search. Not because Isabella had been taken, because she had been sold. By people she trusted. By blood. By family. The realization struck harder than Luca expected. Perhaps because betrayal was something he understood all too well. His own father had been murdered by men who once called themselves allies. He knew exactly what family betrayal felt like. And suddenly he couldn't stop imagining Isabella learning the truth. The pain, the heartbreak, the devastation. The thought alone made his jaw tighten. Dangerously. Days later, another breakthrough arrived. A surveillance recording from Genoa. A private harbor. A woman escorted from a yacht under heavy guard. The image was blurry. The distance was significant. But Luca recognized her immediately. Isabella. Alive. The room went silent. For nearly 2 months, nobody had known whether she was dead. Now they had proof. She was breathing, walking, alive. Relief hit Luca harder than he expected, followed immediately by something far more dangerous. Hope. The hunt intensified. Private investigators spread across Italy. Ports were monitored. Communication networks intercepted. Money trails examined. Every lead pointed toward one location. A private island near the Sicilian coast. Officially owned by a luxury investment company. Unofficially controlled by the Morelli family. Luca's enemies. The same family responsible for decades of violence. The same family eager to start another war. Marco studied the intelligence reports. They want you to come. Luca didn't disagree. Because it was obvious. This was bait. A trap. En invitation. And yet none of it mattered. Because Isabella was there. Meanwhile, Isabella finally learned the truth. The revelation arrived through a careless conversation. 2 guards speaking outside her room. One sentence changed everything. Her family got paid. At first, she thought she misunderstood. Then, she heard more. Enough to understand. Enough to break her heart. Her family had sold her. The people she spent years helping, supporting, protecting. They had exchanged her life for money. The betrayal shattered something inside her. For hours she sat alone in silence, unable to cry, unable to move, unable to process the reality. Eventually tears came anyway. Quiet, painful, unstoppable. And for the first time since her abduction, she felt truly alone. Days later, an unexpected visitor entered her room. Victor Armand. Tall, elegant, dangerous. The kind of man who smiled without warmth. He studied Isabella carefully. You've caused quite a bit of trouble. She remained silent. Victor smiled. Do you know how many people are searching for you? No response. His amusement deepened. One man in particular. For the first time, Isabella looked up. Victor noticed immediately. Interesting. Very interesting. You didn't know. Her heartbeat accelerated. Luca. The thought appeared instantly. Why? Why would he search for her? Why would he care? Victor laughed softly. The great Luca De Santis is tearing Europe apart trying to find you. A strange feeling moved through her chest. Confusion. Disbelief. Something else she refused to name. Because it made no sense. None at all. Back in Monaco, Luca stood alone inside the casino gallery. The same place where everything began. The same place where he first saw Isabella standing on a ladder with paint on her hands. The room felt empty now, lifeless. His gaze settled on one particular painting. The Storm over the Sea. The first painting that ever caught his attention. For a long moment he simply stared at it. Then something unusual caught his eye. A detail hidden inside the artwork. Tiny, almost invisible. Coordinates, written into the waves themselves. His pulse quickened. Luca moved closer. The numbers were real. A location. A message hidden in plain sight. A clue Isabella had left months before her disappearance. As if some part of her had known danger was coming. Marco entered moments later. What is it? Luca pointed toward the painting. Marco's expression changed immediately. Because the coordinates matched a private island. The same island connected to the Morelli family. The same island where intelligence suggested Isabella was being held. Silence filled the gallery. Heavy. Dangerous. Final. Marco finally spoke. Boss. Luca's eyes remained fixed on the painting. We know where she is. The realization changed everything. The search was over. Now came the rescue. And every man in the room understood exactly what that meant. Because Luca De Santis wasn't preparing another investigation, he wasn't preparing another negotiation. He wasn't preparing another search. He was preparing for war. And somewhere on a private island beyond Sicily, Isabella had no idea that the most dangerous man in Europe was already coming for her. The storm arrived before dawn. Dark clouds gathered above the Mediterranean, swallowing the horizon in shades of grey and black. The sea looked angry, violent, restless, much like Luca De Santis. Inside a private command center overlooking Monaco harbor, dozens of men moved with military precision. Weapons, maps, satellite image, communication channels. Every detail had been prepared. Every contingency examined. Every route planned. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was a declaration of war. Marco studied the latest intelligence. 40 armed guards. Luca remained silent. Maybe more. Still, silence. Marco sighed. They want you to attack. For several moments, Luca simply stared at the island displayed on the screen. They already made their choice. Marco knew what that meant. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, no peaceful resolution. The Morelli family had crossed a line, and now they would pay for it. On the island, Isabella sensed something changing. The guards appeared nervous. Conversations became shorter. Weapons became more visible. Even Victor Armand seemed distracted. Whatever was happening, it wasn't good. That evening she stood alone, beside a narrow window overlooking the sea. For nearly 3 months she had watched the same horizon, the same water, the same prison. Part of her had stopped believing she would ever leave, yet another part refused to surrender because she couldn't forget one thing: Victor's words. Luca is tearing Europe apart trying to find you. The thought haunted her. Why? Why would he care? Why risk everything? The questions remained unanswered, until gunfire shattered the night. The first explosion shook the island. Glass shattered. Alarms screamed. Men shouted. Chaos erupted instantly. Isabella jumped back from the window. Her heart nearly stopped. Another explosion followed. Closer. Louder. The entire building trembled. Outside, flames appeared near the docks. Then came automatic gunfire. Relentless, violent, terrifying. For several seconds she simply stood frozen. Then she heard a guard scream, De Santis. Everything stopped. Just one name, De Santis. Luca. He had come. The assault was brutal, fast, precise. Luca's men stormed the island from 3 directions. Within minutes, the outer defenses collapsed. The Morelli family fought back fiercely. Bullets filled the air. Explosions illuminated the coastline. The sea reflected fire and death. But Luca never slowed. He moved through the compound like a force of nature, focused, relentless, unstoppable. Nothing mattered except reaching Isabella. Not money, not territory, not power, only her. Every obstacle disappeared. Every enemy fell. Every second felt like an eternity. Because for the first time in his life, Luca was afraid. Not of dying, of being too late. Meanwhile, Victor Armand entered Isabella's room. For the first time, he looked genuinely concerned. You need to move. She stepped backward. No. His patience vanished. Listen carefully. Gunfire echoed nearby. The battle was getting closer. He came for you. The words struck harder than she expected. Victor laughed bitterly. Do you understand what you've done? She didn't answer. Men are dying because of you. His expression darkened. A war is happening because of you. Then his voice lowered. And the most dangerous man in Europe is leading it. Before Isabella could respond, another explosion ripped through the building. The lights flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed the room. Minutes later, footsteps echoed through the corridor. Heavy, fast, determined. Gunshots erupted. Then silence. A terrifying silence. The kind that follows violence. The door burst open. For a moment, Isabella couldn't breathe, because standing in the doorway was Luca, covered in blood, rainwater, smoke, his suit torn, his expression harder than she had ever seen. Yet his eyes searched only for her. Nothing else. No words came. Neither moved. Then Isabella noticed the blood running down his arm. He was injured. The realization broke something inside her. Luca. His gaze softened immediately. Just for a second. Are you hurt? The question surprised her. The entire island was burning. Men were dying. And the first thing he asked was whether she was hurt. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. He crossed the room instantly. Not touching. Not forcing. Simply standing close enough for her to know she wasn't alone anymore. You came. The words escaped before she realized it. Luca stared at her, as if there was another option. The escape should have been simple. It wasn't. The Morelli family had one final card left to play. As Luca escorted Isabella toward the evacuation point, a convoy of armed vehicles blocked the road. The ambush happened instantly. Bullets tore through the darkness. Luca pushed Isabella behind a stone wall. Gunfire exploded around them. For several minutes, survival became the only objective. Then, everything went wrong. An enemy sniper appeared on a nearby rooftop. The shot came without warning. Isabella never saw it. Luca did. Without hesitation, he stepped in front of her. The bullet struck his shoulder. Blood erupted instantly. Time stopped. Isabella screamed. Luca stumbled, then regained his balance. His men eliminated the sniper moments later. But the damage was done. For the first time, Isabella saw the truth. Not rumors. Not power. Not fear. The truth. Luca had willingly taken a bullet for her. Without hesitation. Without thought. Without regret. Hours later, they escaped the island. The battle ended. The Morelli family suffered devastating losses. Victor Armand disappeared. The war was effectively over. Yet, Luca couldn't celebrate because he finally discovered the complete truth. The evidence recovered from the island confirmed everything. Isabella had been sold by her own family. The debt payments, the transactions, the agreements, all real, all undeniable. The revelation shattered her. For a long time she sat alone aboard the yacht, returning to Monaco, silent, heartbroken, lost. Eventually Luca joined her. Neither spoke immediately. The sea stretched endlessly around them. Dark, beautiful, lonely, much like both of them. Finally Isabella broke the silence. They sold me. Luca didn't deny it. Tears appeared again. They were my family. The pain in her voice felt unbearable. For several moments, Luca simply sat beside her. Then he said something unexpected. Family isn't blood. She looked at him. His expression remained calm, controlled, yet honest. Family is who stays. The words hit harder than anything else, because for months everyone had abandoned her, except him. Weeks later, Monaco appeared peaceful again, on the surface, but Luca wasn't finished. The casino remained closed. Construction crews waited. Investors complained. Partners demanded answers. Nobody understood why repairs hadn't begun, until the anniversary of Isabella's disappearance. That night, every major figure in Monaco received the same invitation: meet at Aurelia Casino. Midnight. No explanation, no details, just a location. Hundreds arrived. Politicians, business leaders, criminals, journalists, everyone. Then Luca appeared, standing alone in front of the casino. The building illuminated behind him. Beautiful, magnificent, worth billions. Silence covered the crowd. Then Luca spoke. For months I looked at this building and saw failure. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. This is where she disappeared. A long pause followed. Then he gave a single order. The explosion shook the city. Flames erupted from every floor simultaneously. Gasps echoed across the harbor. People stared in disbelief. The casino burned like a funeral pyre against the night sky. Millions, perhaps billions, destroyed, gone, And Luca never looked away, because he didn't see a casino. He saw the place where Isabella had been taken, the place where he failed to protect her. And some wounds could never be repaired, only burned away. Weeks later, construction began on something entirely different. Not another casino, an art foundation. A place dedicated to emerging artists. A place where people like Isabella could thrive. No gambling, no crimi, no secrets, just art and possibility. The idea shocked everyone, except Isabella, because she knew the truth. The foundation wasn't about public image. It wasn't about redemption. It was about her. One evening, she found Luca standing alone inside the unfinished gallery. Sunlight streamed through massive windows overlooking the sea. For a while, they simply stood together, comfortable in the silence. Finally, Isabella smiled. "You burned down a casino." Luca glanced at her. "You noticed." A laugh escaped her, the first genuine laugh in months. His gaze softened immediately. The sound seemed to affect him more than he expected. Then silence returned. Not awkward, not painful, just real. Eventually, Isabella stepped closer. "So what happens now?" Luca looked toward the sea, then back at her. For perhaps the first time in his life, he spoke without armor, without power, without control. "I don't know." She held his gaze. The honesty surprised her. The vulnerability surprised her even more. Then she reached for his hand. And this time, he didn't pull away. Months later, Monaco moved on. The war ended. The Morelli family collapsed. The island was abandoned. The headlines disappeared. But some stories never truly end. One evening, visitors entered the new gallery for its grand opening. Paintings lined every wall. Music filled the air. Hope replaced fear. At the center of the gallery hung a new painting. A storm over the sea, more beautiful than the first, more powerful, more personal. Below it stood two people, un artiste, and the man who crossed Europe to find her. Neither perfect, neither innocent, yet somehow they had saved each other. Outside, the Mediterranean shimmered beneath the evening sky, and for the first time in a very long time, both of them believed the future might hold something brighter than the past, something worth protecting, something worth fighting for, something that looked a lot like love. The end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Would you trust a man who burned down his own empire to save you?